Good evening,
Good evening.
and welcome to Pit History Guy and my interview with my friend Sheri Bailey. Let
Hello,
me share my
everyone.
screen. Let me share my screen here. So Sheri is
Yes, sir.
my friend for many years, although which means I'm old, but she's not.
Thank you.
And Sheri is, as you can see, is a historian in Tidewater, Virginia. I am most of my life from Tidewater, Virginia, and let's see. Sorry about this. I don't know if let's kill that. And Sheri is a Portsmouth native who does history from standpoint of a playwright who writes and directs her own plays and also does other history related special events. So Sheri, tell us how you got into becoming a historical playwright and special event creator.
Well, it starts for me in terms of becoming a historical playwright in Los Angeles. I was living there. I was attending UCLA as a graduate student in the theater playwriting department, and one day was walking through a neighborhood in LA off of Crenshaw Boulevard, and stumbled into this event that was called Juneteenth. Had never heard of that before. June who? June what? Which I was to hear many times as I went forward with everything. But that day, it was introduced to me, and it was explained that it was about celebrating the end of slavery in America. Essentially, it was kind of the Emancipation Proclamation. The signing of that was uh, read to enslaved people in Texas on June 19th, 1865. And because of the date on the calendar, that celebration became known as Juneteenth. Uh, you know, uh, there are other terms that were used in 1865 at the end of the Civil War, and Emancipation Day, Freedom Day, Victory Day. But because it was June 19th that they got the news in Texas, that date became known as Juneteenth. So fast forward to moving back home to Virginia and realizing that a lot of the history that talks about, Juneteenth, that kind of involves the Juneteenth theme was my local history. And, Hampton Roads, Tidewater, was a major stop on the Underground Railroad because of the waterways and the Great Dismal Swamp. People would leave out of Richmond, which was the second largest slave auction block in the nation, and they knew that if they didn't make their attempt for freedom at Richmond, that they would be going further north, further south, and it would be much harder to get freedom. So they would jump off looking for freedom off of Richmond, come this direction. And because again, we have all of the waterways and so forth like that, this was a great area to continue up north. Or if you stayed here, you went into the swamp, the Great Dismal Swamp, and you became your own part of that community, which was I call it the first interracial community in America, because you had Europeans, you had Africans, you had Native folks, and they all lived in the swamp pretty relatively free. They were known as Maroons, and that is a culture that very much interests me. Um, so you got here and founded the nonprofit Juneteenth Festival Company, or JuneteenthVA, and started, taking that history and creating plays that encouraged, people to talk about this history that had been hidden or not talked about, and polite company, as they would say, and started, getting, folks to again have conversations. That was a big part of the work. Is that present the history and then have a conversation about it, so we could have people talking about really difficult history, difficult issues, in mixed settings, and not come to throwing chairs and insults, but indeed having conversations where people were listening carefully and speaking honestly.
Very good. So, Sheri, let me get back to sharing the slide here, and
there we go.
So, talk about the series of plays that started you off in UCLA.
UCLA was a great experience for me. It was. I wrote 5 plays in about 2 years, and all of them got produced. And that was, it made me really kind of different in LA. LA is a film and television town, and here I was doing all of this theater. It was a mecca for me because in LA they had something called equity waiver theater, and if you had found a theater that was 99 seats or less, you didn't have to deal with union rates. So you could put on a show for relatively, little cost, and everybody was excited because you had your actors, directors, and playwrights, getting work done, and you can invite producers and agents and all those kind of folks. So it was, I loved, doing. It was kind of like off Broadway in LA, and I was averaging about a play, sometimes 2 plays a year. And it was just wonderful in terms of just being able to be creative and, be, able to, earn a living, which is what I did by working on television shows, production staffs. I did that by day, and I was a playwright by night, and it was a great life, and I tell people if I'd had the kind of, exposure and, credit list in New York that I had in LA, it would be a different situation. But I'm glad it worked out the way it did, because when I was leaving LA, I had to make the decision of whether I was going to come back to Virginia or if I was going to go to New York. And, I had a daughter who was, my daughter Peyton was turning 7 years old and about to start school. And so I had to make that decision of whether or not I was going to be a single parent and, in a big city, or go back to Virginia and have that family support to raise my daughter. And so that's how I got back to Virginia. But in LA, back to that, I, was able to get productions going. And the first production of that I ever had was a play called Southern Girls. And Southern Girls, I co-wrote. It's the only play of mine that I've actually co-written with someone, and that was Dura Curry, and my dear friend. She was born and raised in the South, as was I, and she's white and I'm Black, and we were talking about our experiences growing up as Southern girls, and from those conversations evolved the play that features 6 girls, 6 females, 3 white, 3 Black, that we take from their early childhood, from the ages 6 and 7, into their early 40s. And so we follow them over the course of their lives from in that time frame. And it was a huge hit. We were really excited, and it was just, kind of like all quite heady, to have this, play that was, being just kind of so celebrated by so many. And it was a great writing process. We would talk about, the girls, the characters, their lives, and, that kind of at the ages that they were. And then we would go our separate ways and write our keys and, write our pieces. And so I wrote the Black keys and she wrote the white keys. And from that, we came Southern Girls. You can actually get a copy of that. It got published by Dramatic Publishing Company, and it's available through them as well as Amazon. And it gets done at colleges a lot because it has 6 strong female roles, and apparently that's a difficult thing to find a lot of times at that level, good strong female roles. So we're happy to accommodate them, and so Southern Girls gets done around the nation at colleges a lot, and that's always kind of fun when we're invited to come and be a part of that process. And
Excellent.
then,
so
yeah,
I'm talking to you from Pittsburgh, and we talk about your next play, your six section play, which we talked in our practice, is that an homage to a certain famous playwright in Pittsburgh who also did a cycle of plays.
Yeah, Mr. Wilson, Mr. August Wilson. I mean, and whenever his name is, mentioned in the same conversation with my name, I take credit and get really proud of that. But yeah, Summers in Suffolk is six plays, as you just said, that are starting the year 1870 and come all the way up to 1992. And as again, each play is written to stand alone, and although they weren't written in order from 1870 to 1992, they do they do connect that way. So we cover 4 generations of families over 120 years, and we're looking to do Summers in Suffolk here in Tidewater in 2022. It's a big play, takes over almost 25 actors, and of course lots of costumes and all that kind of good stuff. But it's really for me an opportunity to highlight those Black folks who were not a part of the big migration up north, but stayed home on the land and made their lives from that perspective, that this is my home, this is my land, and I'm going to stay here. And so I look forward to being able to do Summers in Suffolk next year. And then the next one up there was Walking with the Panther, which was a homage to the Black Panther Party. And it follows a man named R.J. Jackson, who we see him for his first 7 days in freedom after being in prison for almost 25 years. And he went to prison because he believed in the principles of the founding principles of the Black Panther Party, which was about educating the community and defending the community. And he gets out after 20-something years in prison, and he sees more pain and destruction in the world, and he's frustrated and he's tired. And the play, he talks about leaving his family, and he can't stay home anymore. But his wife Ella has been living those principles. She's been a community leader, raised their children, and now she wants her husband to be beside her. And so the play follows that story of R.J. Jackson and his wife Ella, as I say, as a tribute to the Black Panther Party. And that play actually won me a National Endowment for the Arts Fellowship, and so I'm very proud of that. And it is again one of those plays that I hope to get produced. In 2022, all of these plays are still relevant, very relevant, I believe. And it is only when the plays are up and being produced that the message gets through. So that's why theater is my chosen genre, but it is a very specialized world that we live in as theater people, because you have to have a show up mounted. It can work on the page, but it doesn't mean anything if it's not on the stage.
So you go from Walking with the Panther, which is about a very proud and demonstrative of your heritage person, to the complete opposite in Passing.
Passing was I have to give the credit for Passing to Nancy Sherrill Davis, who is a producer, writer, an actor based in LA with a theater called Town Street Theater. And Nancy had been looking for a writer to adapt Passing from the novel that it was written by Nella Larson in the Harlem Renaissance, and turned into a stage play. And she'd gone through a bunch of writers, from what I understand. And finally, when we connected, we got the adaptation that won her a NAACP Image Award for Best Actor in the play. And Passing is about Black folks who are light enough to pass as white, but also passing on another level is about sexuality. What are they passing as gay, as straight when they're gay? And so passing on multiple levels, it's about identity. And I'm looking forward to another kind of remounting of that play, because it's set in the 1920s and the costumes are fabulous. So I just kind of love, being able to be around that process when we do passing, because it's just like transporting you to another age. I mean, the Harlem Renaissance, the Roaring '20s, it's all great, a lot of fun there. So, and speaking of fun, then the next play that I wrote that was Danny and Lawrence, which is a romantic comedy that is kind of loosely based on my experience of being house sitting for a professor when I was at the University of Pennsylvania, and she a house sat with her, and I had a housemate, a fellow named Charles, who was a Lothario, just kind of like multiple, all sorts of overnight guests. And I was at that point in a committed relationship with the man that I would ultimately end up marrying. And it was just kind of like, kind of a party house, and we had neighbors who a minister who lived next door who, was one step a phone call away from like calling the police on us several times, and it was just kind of a silly romantic comedy, but kind of based on my life. And it was Anne Marie Johnson, who was one of my classmates at UCLA. Auditioned, and she met the man who she's married to now 30 years later. He played Lawrence, so she was Danny, he was Lawrence. They met on the production, and they have been married, happily married, ever since. And I feel, at this point that I'm going to talk to Anne Marie and Marty, and we're going to have to come up with some kind of reality show, because we managed to shoot a 45-minute pilot of the play, and it's just been sitting gathering dust on a VHS. That's how long ago it was that we did the filming of it all, but we have it preserved. And I think that hopefully with this this interview with you, in fact, Paul, that I can kind of get the word out that it's time to start remounting all of these shows and get busy again. Mayhem at the Red River Bar was a play that I also wrote during that time. And that was basically a romantic comedy, again, another romantic comedy set in a lesbian bar somewhere deep in Texas. And I remember a lot of people were surprised to that, that was my play. It was just like, yeah, I didn't know you were gay. Well, I'm not, but I'm a playwright, so I can. It's okay for me to write about that, And so that play, in fact, was such a big hit that it ran for about 6 months in a place called the Deja Vu Coffee House in North Hollywood, and it was great fun to go down there like on a Saturday night and just kind of hang with the audience. They were having people who would, get together and come down from San Francisco and Oakland and, up from San Diego, and they would just kind of make a party of it. And so that was a lot of fun to be a part of a play that ran that long, because you go through cast changes and all sorts of things over a course of 6 months. It doesn't stay the same. So it grew, and it just was a great experience. And finally, All Kinds of Blue was the very first play that I actually wrote, full-length play that I wrote. I wrote that the first couple months that I was at UCLA, and it had readings, and it won me some awards, and it was produced a couple of times. And but I'm most proud of the production that we did in Terminal Island Prison. The play All Kinds of Blue is about a woman named Aretha Kynes who gets out of prison after a few years, and she's trying to reestablish her relationship with her mother and her daughter, her 17-year-old daughter. And it is a story of redemption, and music. Music is really a big part of the story, and continue to want to. That's never been produced in terms of any kind of filming or anything like that, but I feel like I would love to get that produced. Jasmine Guy has optioned All Kinds of Blue a couple of times over the years. And so, again, I'm putting out the word that it's time for these projects to get picked up and to move forward. And so, Jasmine, if you're listening, All Kinds of Blue is still relevant, and I think that we should get that moving as quickly as possible.
So before we go to the next slide, I'd like to mention to those of you who are attending tonight that feel free to put any questions or comment, like you have a comment, thank you, from Funny Dog. Any questions you have for Sheri, and we will be addressing those at the end of her presentation. And thank you much. Go ahead, and let's go to so now, Sheri, you go from your LA written play. Now you move back home.
That's right. I get back home and I'm like, what am I going to do here? You know, in the middle of, because I left running after high school. I left at a gallop after high school, never to return was what I had to, you know, what I was saying to folks, you eat my dust. I'm out of here. And so here it is. I'm here in, you know, Tidewater, which of course at that point, the Chamber of Commerce has said it's not Tidewater anymore, it's Hampton Roads. And so it was like, what? Okay. And still nobody knew where Hampton Roads was. So it was just kind of like, I now, you know, kind of trying to split the difference. I call it Tidewater Hampton Roads. And that's, you know, that's my game and I'm sticking to it. And well, the first thing I did is you know, as I said, founded the company and put on a festival, a Juneteenth festival. That first year, I think, was '97, and you know, one of the kind of the post-event kind of concerns that I had was that how do you get the message out about Juneteenth? You know, it was great to have vendors and we had hot button topics, you know, discussions and so forth like that. But I needed a way to be able to kind of emphasize certain, you know, questions and you know, to ask certain questions and to create certain conversations. And that's how Abolitionist Museum came to being. An Abolitionist Museum features 8 figures from history and who all had a major impact on the slavery narrative in America. And they are wax figures in a museum. The museum curator brings in a Confederate flag and they debate whether or not to burn that flag. And it brings up all sorts of wonderful themes about the value of your vote. I mean, and then the 8 characters are 8. Who are they? They are Sojourner Truth, Harriet Tubman, John Brown, Frederick Douglass, Harriet Beecher Stowe, Nat Turner, and I always forget one of. It's like the 7 Dwarfs. You always forget one of them, and I always forget one of the 8. But David Walker, did I say him? But they, you know, through their writings and their speeches, we get a sense of who they are and why, you know, this vote is important to them. And then at the end of the show, we asked the audience, okay, you are a wax figure in this museum. What would your vote be, to burn or not to burn the Confederate flag? And the answers have been, the discussions have been really just incredible, as particularly when we go into schools. I love the middle school students the most because they're not jaded and they're thoughtful when, you know, asked the question seriously about this. They are interested in talking about this, but, you know, it has to be presented in a way that makes, you know, connects to them. And the plays have seemed to accomplish that. So Abolitionist Museum, I would say, has been, you know, performed. We've, you know, performed at least before, I would say, about 10,000 students, which is not a huge number at all, but for a little play traveling around the countryside, we feel pretty proud about that. In the same vein, African Kings and Queens is a game show musical comedy where we feature Hannibal and Cleopatra as contestants on a game show called Egyptian Squares. And we have 4 other kings and queens who are part of the game show experience there. And it's a lot of fun. And yet we, again, are educating about, you know, people and events and countries and areas that people don't know anything about, really. And the experience that I had with African Kings and Queens, one that I remember so well, is that the young woman who was playing Cleopatra, a brown skin, woman, she's playing Cleopatra, and we're talking about Cleopatra's character one day. And, it has always been, he said that Cleopatra committed suicide. And this young woman said, no, she was in a cave. She needed a little me time. And, one of those apps got her, but she did not go in there and kill herself. And it was just a new perspective on something that I had accepted as, truth. It's always been said that Cleopatra committed suicide. And this woman said she rejected that. And that's what actors do. You have to, see your character, and you have to create your background for them. And I found it just wonderful that for this young woman, it was, rejection of the negative, and her background story was that this was a strong woman who got caught up in this accidental death. And as we don't truly know what happened, why can't that be an answer? So to that end, I am always wonderful, enjoying what I learned from my actors and from my audiences about these type of situations, because I don't have all the answers, and that's what the whole point of theater is. And most art, I believe, is to help people be able to see the world through a different perspective, to expand our horizons, our imaginations, and help us be able to connect to what we don't understand.
Yeah. Tell us about Two Harriets.
The next, say that again.
Now tell us about Two Harriets.
The Two Harriets. I don't know why suddenly I can't hear you as clearly as I did before.
Now, okay?
But if you can hear me.
Yeah, I can hear you fine. Can you hear me okay now?
Two Harriets is that would be Two Harriets are Harriet Tubman and Harriet Beecher Stowe, telling their lives and sharing their lives in song and story. And it's just the two of them, and people often say, well, where are they exactly? And it's my version of what heaven would be. You're kind of taking care of your business and doing something that you enjoy, and that you can get to do that for an eternity and visit with other people who are on that same journey. So the Two Harriets, again, telling the story of those two incredible women. They did not meet in real life, so that is kind of poetic license that was taken there. But what they share with each other seems to really resonate with audiences. And look forward to seeing that in the schools in a real way down the pike, in terms of there was the governor Northam had commissioned a group to the curriculum school recommendation, that excited about that, offer them some work along those lines. So Ben and Jefferson, the next history play, is Benjamin Banneker and Thomas Jefferson were pen pals. Uh, Pen pals that start that identified as the first African American inventor, scientist, engineer that we know of. He sent Jefferson some of examples of his work, and and then an apology. And Jefferson, to his credit,
Sheri seems to have froze for a second and dropped off. We'll have to add her Give me a second. Here we go. Here we go.
Okay.
You're back.
So
You broke up for
I think I left out on
so
Ben and Jefferson. Okay.
you're right.
Ben and, yeah. So did you hear anything about Ben and Jefferson?
Just a little. Go ahead and
Benjamin Banneker and Jefferson were pen
right.
pals.
Right.
You're right. Okay. As I said, Jefferson had black with sending Jefferson samples of his work and demanding an apology, in which to credit Jefferson's colleagues, and because it was quite brilliant, and he responded to Banneker by saying that he had done so, and this went back and forth for several exchanges, and so they were again trying to present the history in ways that are interesting and create and prompt conversation. Jefferson was a great poet who wrote the Declaration of Independence, but he was also a slaveholder. So, how do we approach that and be, that the reality of all of that is. And that is the goal of all the plays, is again to present this difficult history in ways that help people have conversations about it in a way that is helpful. The Army of One, James Armstead Lafayette, basically is the story of James Armstead, who was an enslaved man here in Portsmouth. And when the Marquis de Lafayette met him, realized that this man was brilliant and had great skills, and hired him to be a spy on Cornwallis at Yorktown. And James Armstead was able to provide intelligence that helped pretty significant. And what he hoped for, of course, was to get his freedom. And that didn't happen until about 12 years later, when the Marquis de Lafayette had come back to this country for a celebratory tour, a reunion tour, and met James and realized, met up with him and realized that he did not yet have his freedom, and said that was ridiculous, and made a couple phone calls, and next thing you know, James Armstead is a free man getting a pension, and at which point the first thing that he did in freedom was to change his name and add Lafayette to his name. And so James Armstead Lafayette, went on to become an owner of enslaved people, mostly his family, which is what the situation would be for purchase in order to protect them. And so that's the story of the Army of One. And then the Juneteenth puppets are just everybody from Powhatan and Pocahontas to Arthur Ashe and Cowboy Nate Love, and all sorts of folks across the spectrum there, who are puppets, and we kind of mix and match them together. A fellow named James T.L. Cooper was one of the first people to work with me in terms of creating these puppets, and he now Coop has a great kind of lineup of puppet shows that he does all over the up and down the East Coast. And I did want to mention one thing about Abolitionist Museum in terms of like audience response. We were doing the play out in Suffolk, and suddenly from the audience, someone shouts, "Nat Turner killed my family." And we were like, who said that? And it turned out to be 70-something-year-old Rose Nichols, who was a descendant of one of the victims of the Nat Turner insurrection. And she said that like it had happened the week before. and that she was there. And so we said, ma'am, we're going to finish the conversation and we're going to have a post-show conversation. And also in the audience that day, we had members of the Sons of the Confederacy who'd heard about the play's plot to burn the flag and their flag. And so they were in the audience. And Paul, it was one of the best post-show conversations you could ever hope for in terms of people coming from radically different perspectives, being able to have a conversation that was civil and useful. And again, that becomes the goal. That is the goal, to be able to make those conversations happen. We have to have these community conversations. Otherwise, we're never going to be able to move forward.
Amen. Thank you. That's beautiful. And
Amen.
That's why I love you. So now the next few slides are going to be, so that's great in detail. So we'll hit through the next few slides that lighter. So this just shows a picture. I believe this is from a newspaper advertisement you had. For
this
one of your
was we had a festival event. Yeah. I was doing a libation at the beginning of
good again.
The festival that in Portsmouth City Park in 2016, and I'm really proud of the fact that, you know, in a silhouette. What happened? Am I here?
Your audio is breaking up again.
So yeah, that's from the 2016 Portsmouth City Park Juneteenth Festival libation at the top of, you know, at the top of the.
Okay. The next slide we have, it shows an outdoor.
It'd been up and down. Oh, I'm so sorry.
Next photo we have shows an outdoor presentation of Abolitionist Museum. So
back. Okay. Sorry about this, folks.
Go ahead.
Am I back?
You're back.
Okay. Yes. So I'm sorry. Yeah, I'm not touching anything. I promise you, Paul.
That's fine.
I'm just sitting here.
Go on. This is COVID.
Yeah. So, and when you say that, and I want to kind of update, you know, what's going on in the world. That's a big part of these plays here. Is it's about showing the past and then bridging it to the present, because so much of this still is relevant in terms of like the lives that we lead. You know, the lives that we lead today are based on what COVID thing that's going to be a part of the conversation, you know, moving forward in terms of what we do in the theater. A big part of what we want to be doing, what we want to do, is to teach folks how to be historical reenactors. I say that again.
Oh, it's if you want to quickly, some of them are obvious, of course. You can't miss Frederick Douglass's hair. But if you want to walk us from left to right, who are the characters?
Okay, right. So we got on the left there, John Brown, which is Ed Harvey Jones there, who has been playing John Brown for about 20 years. Is like has embodied John Brown in so many ways during this play. Then next to him we have Nat Turner, and I'm blanking on the gentleman's name that was who played him in that show there. But then sitting down in the green skirt we have Sojourner Truth. Behind her we have Abraham Lincoln, and sitting down beside Abraham Lincoln and between Frederick Douglass we have Harry Beecher Stowe. And to the right of Frederick Douglass, we have Harriet Tubman and David Walker beside her. Most people don't really know who David Walker is. He wrote a 76-page pamphlet called David Walker's Appeal to the Colored Citizens of the World, and particularly to those of the United States of America. And it was in 1829 that it was published, and then it was quickly banned and became illegal to be caught reading it or to distribute it. So, and then he mysteriously died in like 1831, just before the Nat Turner insurrection, and they believed that he was poisoned. So,
was that pamphlet an inspiration partially for Harriet Beecher Stowe's Uncle Tom's Cabin, perhaps?
I don't think so, because it would be Harriet Beecher Stowe was really about, more pacifist in terms of, thinking, we just need for people to like come together, have a cup of tea, and, learn that, people are good people, everybody's a good person. Whereas David Walker was like, if you don't get rid of slavery, it's going to be a bloodletting kind of, he was advocating violence. And that's another one of the themes that is talked about in the Abolitionist Museum, is the use of violence. The violence that was used by Nat Turner and and espoused by David Walker is not, workable in the 21st century. So, how do we, again, look for those solutions that fit the times that we live in? And by, looking at the past, that helps give us some help in terms of like coming up with some answers, I believe.
Very good. Let's go to the next.
Yeah. The final character in the Abolitionist Museum is the curator. And generally I play that role, but and then the reason I play that role is because, one, it's hard to find a whole full cast of folks a lot of times, and two, the curator is often the person who facilitates the post-show conversation.
Very good. Okay. Next is, so again, showing your creativity and not just doing plays and special events, but this is a different kind of media way of reaching out with history.
Yeah. The Contraband Escape
is using the 2D barcode to
yeah. Hopefully, people, will use it, and hopefully, my generation, I call my generation, the kind of like I'm 62 now, and it is, I'm the last generation that can say, well, I don't really understand how this all works, but because my daughter is like, that's no excuse, Mom. You don't have that luxury of saying that you don't know how it all works, But so I committed myself to becoming more familiar with all of the technology that's there, because it's hurting me not to, because I've had so many editorials and articles that have been about me or produced, printed in the Virginia Pilot over the last 20 years. And all I got to do is kind of use this barcode and, and bring them all up. Right. And have I done that? Of course not. And so, but that's on the list of things to do. And, But this story of the contraband story, that's also going to be, we, want to tell that story because it's an important story about showing the agency of Black folks in terms of gaining them. It was not just, waiting a great emancipator to free us, but it was ultimately people doing what they needed to do in terms of gaining that. And 12 Days of Turner is an event that we started last year, and that basically uses the time frame between when Nat Turner was captured on October 30th. He was given a trial, and then he was hung on November 11th. So that 12 days of that time frame is what the 12 Days of Turner is referring to. And what it would do is that everything pertaining to the Nat Turner insurrection, for 12 straight days, we explore that in a variety of ways. One was we're working on the adaptation of the interview that Turner gave when he was in jail during that week, or the 12 days. He gave an interview to a man named Thomas Gray. And the two of them sat in the jail cell, and Nat Turner basically, just kind of gave a kind of a telling of, why and what happened during the insurrection. And so this year we're going to be doing, again, the 12 Days of Turner, and we're going to be far more involved with the Nat Turner farm library that is out in Southampton County, run by Brother Khalifa for the last 30 years, where they do tours and have again panel discussions and information about Nat Turner. So 12 Days of Turner is again a really important um, uh, kind of event for us, because we look at the Nat Turner insurrection. The 1831 Nat Turner insurrection was the first battle war against slavery. The war against slavery, WAS, went from 1831, the Nat Turner insurrection, into 1877, which represented the end of Reconstruction. Federal troops were pulled from the South, which allowed for the rise of the KKK and Jim Crow. So the war against slavery, WA, is a new term that JuneteenthVA is promoting and explaining and sharing with folks, because what we want to do is to create a timeline of the events that constituted, being considered a part of the war against slavery, because we include not only just battles, but we include Supreme Court decisions like the Dred Scott decision, 57, that basically said that Black folks were born enslaved, would live as slaves, and die as slaves. And the John Brown raid on Harper's Ferry in 1859 was the final spark that led to the war between the states, or the Civil War from 1861 to 1865. So that 45-year period between 1831 to 1877, we list these various events and that constitute some change or some relevance to the slavery narrative. So that becomes, again, one of the kind of major motifs, themes of what we do, which is, again, about teaching folks how to research this history and how to be able to share it with, audiences, because ultimately, that's what we're going to do. That's what we'll be teaching at the Portsmouth Theater Academy, is basically teaching people how to be historical reenactors as well as actors on a Broadway stage.
So in the last few slides, we're going to talk about your activity going forward. Before we go to that, since you've been talking about Nat Turner, on the previous slide, that slide on the left is a picture of downtown Norfolk. So for those of you who live in Tidewater, or if you're just coming to Virginia Beach for vacation, you should know that this place, the Nat Turner Rebellion in Southampton County, is only, depending on where in Tidewater you are, is about a 75 to 90-minute drive from there. So it's a very doable, not even whole day. You could do just half a day and go see that and check out the library. I'm not sure. Traditionally, one of the gentlemen has done even a driving tour. I know with COVID things have been a little weird, but like I said, feel free if you're in the area, or if you're just coming down for vacation. I highly recommend you. It's to go explore this and to support the library and to support the tour. So let's talk about what you're up to next. In fact, next, as far as this Saturday.
Yes, this Saturday we have the African Landing Day, which basically is a commemoration, honoring of the 20 and odd Africans from Angola who arrived in late August 1619, and they came ashore at Old Point Comfort, which is where Fort Monroe is today located. So in that general geographical area, they came ashore. And now there is a great deal of conversation about where did they go from there. The traditional, a long-held belief is that some of them ended up in Jamestown as indentured servants. And then there are other folks who don't even want to talk about these folks who arrived in 1619, but want to point to African descent people who were already in this new world in the 1500s. And there's no denying any of that. But what I think, in terms of how we look at those Africans who came in 1619, is that some of them probably did end up in Jamestown. And to tell their story is, particularly as a playwright, where I get to have a little bit more creative freedom in terms of, telling the story, that they were, I would say that they were the ancestors of the Black middle class, because many of them worked their contracts and learned to trade and gained their freedom. So they were free Blacks living alongside of enslaved Blacks. And so to talk about, the Black middle class before the 19th century or the 20th century is unheard of, which is why it's important for Black folks, Native folks, to be able to talk about this history. This history has been told, from one perspective for over 150 years. I often say the for the last 150 years, the people who lost the Civil War have controlled the narrative. And that's got to change. And that's what's changing when we do these plays, where we, again, get people to have these conversations.
Okay, so we're going to wrap this up in the next couple minutes, so we can have 5 minutes before we've got several conversations. Thank you from Funny Dog. Again, this Saturday at Fort Monroe, the overall event is from 11 to 4. One of the Marsalis family will be there, famous jazz family from New Orleans, as part of supporting this, as will, my apology.
KRS-One.
KRS-One. Yeah, Chris. Right. Harrison will be there, and then Sheri's part. Sheri will be participating from the 3 to 4 o'clock segment, and then this is another picture of the 3 gentlemen who in 1861 escaped Road to Freedom at Fort Monroe.
Right.
And like I said, at the interest of time, we want to keep this to an hour. I'll certainly be talking about this in the future, in a future episode. I'm a big fan of the whole abolitionist. And I'll talk about that in a second. Your next project, you're looking at redoing A Great and Dismal Swamp, like you have talked about in other things. Your also intent is, of course, for your Saturday segment at Fort Monroe to try to broadcast that. So hopefully we'll be able to do that. Otherwise, I believe you can go in person, of course, to Fort Monroe.
Yes.
For that event. So let's get to the questions. First of all, first question is every play you've written created to invite conversation after it's presented?
I like doing that a lot. It doesn't always happen, but I always like that idea of having a post-show conversation. We did it with Southern Girls when we did that down at the University of Alabama, Birmingham. And it was, again, as most times, always fascinating and always, kind of thought-provoking in terms of like what comes out of the conversation.
Funny Dog, the other question is, do you believe the story by Gray of Nat Turner? How do we know that what Gray tells is accurate account of his confession, if any?
We went, as we were doing an adaptation of the Confessions, that was a big question about the, Gray's honesty. He was speaking from his perspective and telling, he was writing down what Turner was saying, but he was certainly coloring it with his own perspective of how, what was really the truth and everything like that. So, when we do the adaptation, again, that becomes, part of the conversation, the post-show conversation. The audience is determining what they believe is true and how they feel about it and so forth like that. But that's like, one of the coach in the game kind of thing.
Excellent. And those are the questions that I've received. Thank you for both those questions. Just a quick now plug. Who is this Pitt history guy? My sort of on-screen persona. and who cares? What's my background? What's my passion? What connects me to this? So I've been into history almost all my life. My dad was actually born the first still unofficial, it's just the hamlet of 300 some people down the road about 5-6 miles from where Lincoln was born. So every summer I'd go back, even though I was born as a lost cause Southerner, weirdly enough. It show I'm proud where I'm so screwed up. I was raised with this very, romanticized Southern perspective, but also with a great respect for Lincoln.
That's interesting.
My father. My dad just had his birthday. Today's his birthday. Happy 85 to my dad.
Indeed.
And I'll always find a new Lincoln book for him. So I also continue my long-term residence. So I was born in Kentucky. I spent most of my life in Virginia, where I met Sheri. And I have lived the last 20 years in Pittsburgh, the Pitt part of Pitt History Guy. My kids are now grown, so I get to use that spare time to do some historical volunteering. I volunteer for special events at Soldiers and Sailors Memorial Hall and Museum, which was originally built in 1910 as a Grand Army of the Republic or a Union Veterans Hall. The GAR is sort of the Union equivalent to the Sons of the Confederate Veterans, maybe a little more formal, certainly larger because there were more Union veterans than Confederate. And also at Antietam National Battlefield. I'm a national park volunteer. That's what I'm wearing here. If you come to the battlefield sometime, you may see me some weekend at one of the driving stops. So, and Antietam, not only Civil War, but it connects it to this. Antietam is the battle that 5 days after the battle on September 17th, 1862, Lincoln released the preliminary Emancipation Proclamation on September 22nd because of the battle. So we love to tell the story of emancipation and Antietam is part of that. So we have a large social justice element to our battle at the national park there. First half of my professional life, almost, I was a civilian Navy with Naval Systems Command. So I have that military background, although civilian. My dad, as I mentioned, is a chaplain and a minister. So, and then I also, on the side, I have another history side that I love to game history with miniatures and board games. You can find me you'll see on the next page, as on BoardGameGeek.com as Pitt History Guy as well. I'm the proud dad of 3 grown children. And I'm the friend of wonderful people like Sheri who do history. And every month I'm going to be doing another history person. And next month is going to be Rich Condon, the founder of Civil War Pittsburgh, and who is also currently a national park employee down in South Carolina. Although he's a Pittsburgher, he's down in South Carolina at one of the national park's newest parks, the Reconstruction era National Park down at Beaufort, south of Charleston.
Okay.
So the last thing I'd like to leave everyone with is that you can find Sheri and Juneteenth Virginia, her creation, on many social media sites. JuneteenthVirginia.org, WJVA Radio, which is both a low power station and an online station, her YouTube channel, her by email, and the same way for me, you can find me on my YouTube channel, where this video will be on the YouTube channel after this presentation. You can watch, and on my Facebook page on Pitt History Guy, Board Game Geek, as I mentioned. I am also on Discord, and also my email. So it's 8:01. So I'd like to thank everyone so much for attending, and those who watch after the fact. And thank you, Sheri, for being my special guest tonight. And
thank you, Paul, for inviting me.
And so with that, I would like to end tonight's broadcast, and thank you. Have a good night, everyone.
Thank you. Goodbye.